43 million Americans learned today that their student loans will not be forgiven.
The Supreme Court rejected President Biden's plan to forgive $400 billion in student loan debt. In a 6-3 decision, the court ruled the Biden administration overstepped its authority in trying to cancel or reduce student loans. The court ruled the administration needs the approval of Congress before undertaking such a costly program. They rejected the Biden administration's arguments that the plan was lawful. The law cited says the government can provide relief to recipients of student loans when there is a national emergency.
The case, titled Biden versus Nebraska, involves 6 states, including Iowa and Missouri. Nebraska Attorney General Mike Hilgers went to the U.S. Supreme Court to argue against the Biden program. Hilgers says today's decision stopped a power grab from the president.
This protects one of the most important bedrocks of how we have all agreed to govern ourselves in this country, and it's been a bulwark of freedom, which is the principle of separation of powers here in the United States.